stage. We have one apology until he joins the meeting, and that being Garth Dibley.
Mr. Chair, he's actually in the meeting.
Is he? Well,
Yep.
how did I miss that? Where is he? Oh, he's there.
He snuck in.
All right.
He snuck in.
That. Okay, so I've opened the meeting. We're obviously quorate. Do we need a Matt? Oh, you always need to help me with the procedural issues. So we need a resolution noting no apologies.
No, we don't. We can just move on.
All right. In that case, we do need one to confirm the status of the agenda, and I should ask in doing that, are there any additional items? Noting we are going to move the Better Off funding presentation up to the first report. But any other changes to note on the agenda? If not, can I have someone confirm the status? Moved by Gavin, seconded by Garth. All in favour? Unanimous. Right. Confirmation of the minutes from the meeting held on Tuesday the 15th. They have been circulated. If there's a level of comfort, can I have someone move their adoption? This time Garth, seconded by Gavin. All in favour? Aye. I think all of the actions arising are sitting in the item 5, the actions. So at this stage, Carol, am I passing across to you to take us through the actions on page 25?
Sure thing, thanks David. So the first item regarding the contractual requirements from the water care staff running remuneration, that will be discussed in the PEX section of the meeting. If you will do that, give us a verbal update. The second item on the Huntley wastewater treatment plant upgrade, we haven't got a paper in this pack for you, but we have been quite busy, had a number of meetings with a couple with Sleepyhead developer who's got quite an aggressive timetable of wanting works in this area. We've met with Waikato Regional Council as well on it. We're further meeting with Sleepyhead next week. We've also had a large number of internal meetings looking at what we best do and potentially how we can bring that plant upgrade forward, and we'll bring a paper back once we have more information available. And the third item, the Waters Governance Board one, to meet with Ngā Moku. So Water Care on the board's behalf has contacted Ngā Moku and highlighted that the board is seeking for opportunities to meet with them, and when the next meeting or date could be for that to be appropriate, and we're just waiting to hear back from them.
Thank you very much. All right.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just that was the comment we made at the last meeting as well, I think, Carol, wasn't it?
This was a new action, I think, from last time. Before, it was more about the staff, and Keith did attend a meeting in person with them, and then this was about also having a board representative meeting with Ngā Moku Development Trust also.
Okay, I guess I'm just concerned or conscious that I feel we need to just keep up the dialogue. So, you know, we acknowledging we've requested that, but if we don't get feedback, I think perhaps we should request again just to be on top of it.
Yes, we have asked a couple of times. It's whether perhaps we try a different avenue or a different contact person. I think we've been going through Kay as the nominated contact with them. So I'm not sure whether the board has, someone on the board has a direct relationship with anyone else that we could perhaps try that avenue, or whether you would just like us to continue attempting through our contact.
I think we need.
I do. I've got a direct relationship with them.
All right. I think it's highly desirable that we do try and arrange for a meeting with as many of us that can make it between now and the next governance board meeting. So Jackie, if you're able to assist, I think that would be helpful. Yep. And it doesn't need to be the timing, in my view, of this meeting. It could be an out of cycle discussion for those of us that can make it.
Happy to do that.
Any other items or any other questions or comments arising from the action register? If not, can I have someone resolve that we receive it? Ruku, moved by Ruku, seconded by Gavin, all in favour, aye. That, I think, now brings us to the reports, and we will...
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I just also wanted to quickly introduce Rebecca Chenery, the Chief Technology Officer at Watercare, who's attending today. Rebecca, as I mentioned at the last governance meeting, an executive will be attending each session going forward, just so that we get a clear understanding throughout the business of the water governance and council's needs. So Rebecca has been nominated for today.
Excellent. You're most welcome, and we will look forward to having your participation, particularly when we get to an item within the in-committee part of the meeting. So welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the welcome.
Okay, I've been remiss actually in not welcoming others that aren't normally on this call. And John, I see you are there. So I suggest now that we do take the Better Off funding presentation. And I'm presuming you're going to lead us through that.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me on board. So we're just kicking off this new role as relationship managers on the Better Off support package, and I'm not aware of if everyone has seen the information and the guidance that's on the DIA website. So if you like, I can share a screen. If I can find it. We go to the top of that one. Can everyone see that?
No, but
Not yet.
we've got a presentation that's sitting in our board pack, Three Waters Better Off support package.
Right, and it's a slide deck of about 19 slides.
Yes.
Okay, so that's really what I'll be talking to, and just walking through it. Just to give you a bit of a background. Obviously, there's a package of $2 billion that's going to be available in 2 tranches over the next 5 years. So tranche 1 is for 25% of that funding, $500 million, to be released to local authorities under the package. And that became available from Monday. So there's a period from Monday, 11th of April through to the 30th of September, 2022. For councils to put forward a funding proposal and sign the funding agreement to get access to that first tranche of funding. Now, if we go to page 4 of that document, there's got some high-level objectives there and some that were in the heads of agreement. So it's really money that's going to be supporting communities' transition to sustainable low-emissions economy by increasing resilience to climate change and natural hazards. It could be to provide infrastructure for our housing development. It does not need to be just for water purposes at all. So it can be any infrastructure project that meets the criteria. And to support local placemaking and improvements in the community well-being. So it might be things like swimming pools, libraries, that sort of project. Now the funding process, we have period of 6 months. Well, not quite. We're probably at the end of April. We've got 5 months left to get that funding proposal and agreement into DIA by 30th of September 2022. And I'm here to assist the team put that funding application together and just give guidance on whether or not the projects within that program meet the criteria. And so that's really the role, to help identify and prioritize the projects, to help prepare the funding proposal, and including things like contingency projects if your preferences don't cut muster, and then to help guide that through the system, and then navigate the claims process through the DIA grants management system. So basically, the funding criteria are pretty tight. So it's not about just helping assist projects that are in your current LTP. So it's really to be put towards new initiatives of projects, or if projects are already in your LTP, it's to help accelerate, scale up, or enhance those projects that were already planned. So you might want to be bringing things forward in your LTP that would qualify for that funding.
The important part there, John, is that it won't replace the funding in the LTP. It's only to fund the acceleration or the extension.
That's my understanding of it, and we have put a clarification question to DIA. It's to pay the difference of acceleration or the scaling up or the enhancement component, and that 25% can be up to the. If it doesn't have to be used in the tranche 1, you can roll that forward into tranche 2 in July 2024. Okay, and there's some example initiatives that were put there for guidance, things like public transport improvements to help, changing bus fleets to electric buses, upgrading transport hubs, examples in street lighting. So if you wanted to go to low energy LED lights in your street lighting network, that would qualify. Coastal placemaking initiatives, public space and open air, water parks, for example. Community connectivity initiatives, so that might be public Wi-Fi, for example, or digital automation programs, things that would help speed up the consent application processes, for example, or helping support people living with disabilities to provide more accessibility. So there's a couple of areas for consideration. Is the relationship between the tranches of funding. So because we have a national election between now and tranche 2, there's only an undertaking that we can fund the first component, the first tranche, that's the 500 million. So there's no guarantee that tranche 2 will naturally follow tranche 1, depending on the outcome of the central government elections. But they should be related to each other. So tranche 1 might enable projects to go through detailed design, getting ready for implementation in tranche 2 under a separate approval process. That might be the way to approach that. And then there's, again, each project needs to be some accountability. So what are the milestones or the specific outturn metrics that we want to achieve? And how that's measured. So there's some degree, although it's quite a light-handed approach to the distribution of the funds, but I think the Minister of Finance does want to see some fiscal discipline put to how the money is used. Strongly recommend that contingency projects are put forward. As we saw through the Three Waters stimulus funding, things happen in the global marketplace. Projects can't proceed for some reason or another, and we need to be able to swap that out so you get the best advantage from the funding that's available. Or you may consider other prior funding applications that Council has made, either through the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, the National Land Transport Program. Maybe you've had something turned down in the past, or the IRG Shovel Ready Program. Those can be dusted off and resubmitted if you still have a desire to progress any of those. The other consideration is that there is a desire that we actively encourage the pathway to a target state of partnership with iwi Māori. So taking from the current state and moving towards more of a partnership approach by the end of the 5-year program. And again, so it's moving from informing and consulting with iwi Māori to actually getting into co-design of the processes and developing solutions together. Each of the projects within the program will be subject to a well-being assessment. So we do a quick assessment on how the social, economic, environmental, and cultural well-beings are being addressed throughout the program. And while I can give guidance to the team putting that together, there's still the success and the decisions rest with DIA in the final analysis. But hopefully we can get a good plan and program put together so that can move fairly smoothly through the process. And as far as administration is concerned, the funding release, as I said, the first 10% the total maximum will be payable up front, and then it's actual costs in arrears that can be invoiced on a monthly basis on the basis of costs actually accrued during the period. The reporting requirement is slightly less frequent than the stimulus funding, so we're going to 6-month reporting, although there will be some documentation required if you're submitting invoices on a monthly basis, but it won't be to the same rigor as the 6-month reports. And I'll work with the team on getting those 6-monthly reports over the line. And there will be a process, as with the stimulus program, there is a process for project substitution. Should something happen in your original program, we can do a quick swap out, and we'll have an approval process in place to help with that. The advice is that we build in a reasonable contingency when we're planning projects, because there tends to be this optimism bias that things are cheaper and they're going to happen much quicker than they actually do in practice. And be aware that funding allocations won't be topped up to meet any future shortfalls that might be incurred. So I'd be especially with inflation running at nearly 7%. The global supply chain really hasn't come back yet. So just be cognizant of that when putting estimates together for the plan. And the methodology for allocating the funding, Waikato, let me just quick look at that. So of your 31.53 million, 7.86 in the first tranche is based on the weighting of 75% on population, 20% on the deprivation index of the region, and 5% weighting on the land area covered by the council, excluding national parks. So that's really the advice that we have to date from DIA. On that pack, there's also the appendices that talk about the notional funding allocations across New Zealand. Example of the wellbeing assessments at Appendix B, which has a few examples there of projects around low carbon emissions and increasing use of public transport. So there's a few ideas. These do not need to boil the ocean. They can be fairly brief assessments that just show what wellbeing area does this project contribute to, and how will you measure the success of that. Then there's some advice on the grant management system. I wouldn't be worried too much about that. There's still some further training and some webinars coming up from DIA to walk through how the grant management system works, and I'll be sort of assisting the teams in making those monthly grant applications for the monthly payments. And across the country, they've used CIP, or Crown Infrastructure Partners, to take on the role of relationship managers, because we've already established a relationship with the councils in New Zealand through the delivery of the stimulus package since September, October 2020. So we've got a fair idea and a fairly good working relationship with the councils that we've been assigned to. So for my purposes, I've been assigned Waikato and Bay of Plenty. And so there's 16 councils in that area that I'll be working with. And we're looking for synergies, again, across the jurisdictions wherever they can be made or efficiencies gained. So I'm more than happy to take any questions. So most of the team have got my phone number, they've got my email address. I'm pretty much on call between this and the stimulus funding and a bit of consulting I do. I'm fairly flexible and have a fair bit of availability to support this program. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, John. Just before we do that, either Carol or Keith, perhaps, are there any sort of comments that you want to make from the perspective of where the council's at in regard to availing itself of the opportunity?
Yeah, I can talk to that if you like. So we're underway in terms of building a long list. So that's projects that we can put forward to both tranche 1 and tranche 2. We've got iwi engagement starting on the 3rd of May. So Sam and his team have organised a hui for us to attend to be able to again look at projects that iwi Māori would like to bring to the table. Plus, we can also talk about what's on our long list at the same time. So, starting that consultation piece, but also moving towards partnership and understanding what, from a tranche 2 perspective, we can do within our district and jurisdiction together. So we're at the start of that journey in terms of building the list. We'll look at the criteria and then weight it in order to be able to bring a short list together, and then bring the teams back together to review that short list and make a decision about what projects end up for funding purposes using the criteria method as John's described.
Thank you very much, Keith. Let's just open it up for any questions from governance board members or comments. Any questions, comments?
I've got a couple if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, hi, John. How are you? Garth here.
Oh, Garth, good to see you again.
Yeah. Hey, a couple of questions. Just on the funding allocation. I mean, it's kind of linked to, as you described, areas and social depreciation and all those sorts of good things. But is it also linked back to the Three Waters assets that Waikato District own? Is there any relationship there?
Not to my understanding. So it doesn't look at the valuation of the assets, just the population basis. So I suppose there's some correlation between the population in the district and the asset value, but not directly related to the asset.
Okay. All right. No, that's okay. So, and is there any cost of funding that the council is going to end up bearing?
So I'd be including, when you're putting the programs together, I'd be including your overhead costs and the costs of bringing a dedicated program manager into this and build it into the value of the project, rather than running a separate line for costs to support the program. Embed that into each one. That worked well during the stimulus work.
Yeah. Okay. So separate that out. And the other thing is just like, is there a business case that shows the financial value of the projects that are being put up?
No, this is wide open to the council to decide their priorities, provided they meet those broad criteria of placemaking, low carbon emissions, well-being projects. But they've got to be definable projects that weren't already in a funding plan.
Right. Okay. All right. And the catch to this is therefore support for Three Waters, right?
I think we can actually disconnect that a bit. That's been come up as a question a few times. So some councils, just so you're aware, have said, look, what happens? We've got an election right after the 30th of September. We don't want to show our hands supporting Three Waters by taking this money. So they said, can we leave it till after the elections? And if you read the guidance material in the funding agreement, there's a section in there that talks about the precedents. And it does mean that the document does say that you need to have an agreement by the 30th of September to avoid the offer becoming null and void. But there is an opportunity to apply for a waiver to extend that date beyond 30 September. I don't know what that process is yet, but it does make provision for a waiver for a later sign up.
Yeah, but effectively it is sort of
the
sweet.
That's it. We expect to have that honest, active engagement ongoing through the program.
Yeah, that's fair. So, yep. Okay, no, thank you.
No, thank you, Garth. Any other questions? Ruku? Let's go around no. Gavin? Jackie? No, and none from me. I'm reasonably familiar with the opportunity there, John. So look, many thanks for coming on the call. Appreciate the presentation, and I am sure that we will be back to you with opportunities that we want to avail ourselves of. But look, very helpful presentation. So many thanks, John.
Okay, my pleasure. Have a good meeting. Cheers then. Bye for now.
Okay, let's go back then to item 6.1, the Three Waters Reform Project update. And Ruku, I presume you're going to disclose your interest here before we launch into the paper. You're on silent.
Sorry, yes, John. Sorry, David. Just you're right. Just my role on the National Transition Unit.
Okay, so
disclosure of the conflict. Yeah.
Have that recorded, and who is going to talk to this? Is this you?
I'll start, but I just want to introduce Deron. Deron Sharma is on board as our Three Waters Reform Project Manager. So he's taking the lead in terms of keeping us on track for the projects, and has been working through the current RFIs and information back to DIA. So I'll introduce you to Deron.
Thanks, Keith, and welcome, Deron. And my understanding is it's fairly exhaustive in terms of the information that's being required, but leave it over to you to present to us.
That's true. Tēnā Chair, kia ora te whānau, ko Deron tōku ingoa, no whiti o ko te puna, ke te noho au ki kirikiri roa. Today, I will be presenting an update of the activities undertaken in the Three Waters Reform Project to the Waters Governance Board, and I will take the report that I've submitted as read. So I will, oh, sorry, I'm just trying to, my slides have frozen for some reason. Sorry, just bear with me.
It's all right. Don't we love technology?
Okay, I think I will have to refer back to my report instead of the slides that I had. So I will go through each of the sections and just give a brief update on what we've actually been taking under each heading that I've given. I'll just load that up. Right, so as we had mentioned in the last Waters Governance Board meeting, we had received a data and digital request for information from the National Transition Unit. So we developed a working group within Council comprising of Keith, myself, Jeff King, and Matthew Telfer from Watercare. And we had advised the NTU that we would be populating the spreadsheets separately. So Watercare would be doing one submission and we would be doing another submission. And we had advised them to read those spreadsheets in tandem because Watercare does take care of most of our core waters operations. But WDC's software still has some touch points with waters and most of it is shared within the council. So we've got our finance systems that has a touch point. Our customer and billing, it's mostly within council as well. And I think our asset planning as well. And as you mentioned, it has been quite labor intensive, but we managed to get it through to them. So the only issue was with that, the NTU was not prepared to have both documents submitted. So we have done it from our end, we have submitted it to them, but they have to make a provision to allow for both separate spreadsheets to be loaded against our council, because at the moment, the way their system works is that only one spreadsheet per council can work. So again, it's a conversation of NTU being aware of the unique arrangement that we've got with regards to our water service delivery, which is a conversation that we're having at the moment as well. On to the next item, which is the Rural Supplies Technical Working Group. An update from last time. So a request for information was made to council from the Rural Supplies Technical Working Group, which is part of the National Transition Unit. And this RFI sort of sought information on our shared service schemes, which is in the rural sector, which was also for agricultural supplies, but also served as a drinking water supply. And we responded to this RFI. Council does not own or operate any such supplies, but we did introduce them to Te Kowhata Water Association because they may have their own arrangements. So as mentioned in the report, Hinekorako is Tomata Arawai's database that they've developed, which sort of provides that one source of truth for drinking water suppliers, consumers, as well as laboratories. As part of this, it was launched on the 1st of April, but before that, Council had been inserting our water supplies. And to date, on the public end of Hinekorako, 14 of our water supplies within our district have been published. And from the 17th of Jan to the 28th of March of 2022, Tomata Arawai had also sought some feedback on the proposed drinking water standards. We have submitted our feedback and it has been very congruent with Water Care Waikato submission as well. I won't speak too much on the Better Off funding because John Mackey covered quite a bit of the points that I was going to cover. I guess going into a bit more detail into what Keith said, we've developed sort of a decision matrix based off of DIA's funding, but also based off of some of our community well-being outcomes and related it to some of our blueprint themes and areas. And this spreadsheet has been dispersed to different managers within council. And we have given 6 weeks to get some feedback from internal council staff on this. And then after that, which will be used to develop our long list. After that, we'll probably spend 3 weeks shortlisting it. And along this timeline, we will also have our iwi consultation. And once that is done, we intend on spending another 6 weeks on developing a business case for that with the intention of submitting it to DIA for approval by August of this year. And just another note to end off this update, I will move on to the local transition team. So I would just like to make the Water Governance Board aware that Keith Martin, our waters manager, has been nominated by Gavin Ion to be on the local transition team. And the local transition team to date has been meeting weekly, but since the Easter break, they have taken a break and they're intending on resuming the weekly meetings from next week. So I think that's pretty much the update from me. I guess moving forward, since I wrote the report, we have also received an RFI from the National Transition Unit's commercial and legal team. So we will be working through that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll just one point of clarification, then I'll open it up for any questions or comments from other members. The Better Off funding, what's the decision process? Will it go to council? Will it come via the Water Governance Board? What's intended to actually reach a decision around what's being submitted for support? Maybe Gavin, that's one for you.
So, Mr. Chair, that ultimately will be a council decision. Yep. So, as Keith said, we're putting together a list of a long list of the projects, but they could cover all spectrums of council activities. So we are organising a separate briefing for councillors from John Mackey. So he can pretty much give them the same presentation that the board's just had, so they can then get their heads around it as well. That's the intent. Yeah.
So the supplementary to that is, if they did involve Three Waters, then I presume this governance board would have an ability to express an opinion around provide that support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Gavin. All right, just opening it up to others for any comments. Garth? No. Ruku? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Patterson, Eugene. Good morning.
That's all right. No, thank you, Dave. Just thanks for the update. And as Gavin's mentioned, there is going to be a presentation coming to councillors, which is really good. But I think for Keith and Darren, and that is that Wayne Gavin also, is that probably the sooner the better for that, because I do see you starting to go through internally and work on projects and that, but we know too far, if we go too far down the track and councillors haven't been involved along the way, it becomes an issue. So I think the earlier they get on board as well and align to some of the work you're doing, the better. So.
Yeah, point well made.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Right. Ruku, did you have any questions or clarification? Gavin? Jackie?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Just one, I think it's probably to the team. So we've had a number of discussions over the last few months around acceleration of our projects for waters. We know that the impact of escalation and etc. will start to hit us in the waters space. Are we looking to identify those projects in informing this long list and then assessing identifying the short list? I would just hate the opportunity for the shortfalls that we know exist within waters to, I guess, not be high up on the list of considerations for the better off funding.
Keith, would you like to respond, or Carol or Keith?
Yeah, no, I can respond to that. So the answer is, Jackie, yes, waters will be having projects added to the long list for consideration against the criteria. I guess it is fair to say that the better off funding is open to all aspects of council, business and community aspiration. So for the first tranche being 7.88 million and a total of rounding up 32 million for total tranche 1 and 2, I guess there's going to be a significant number of projects for the small amount of funding. So it's going to be interesting to see how we get through that evaluation process and what comes to the top.
Mr. Chair, can I just comment, because I don't think that's exactly what Jackie was asking. I thought what Jackie was saying was, are we going to be able to cover and look at putting forward some of the possible escalations on some of those waters projects under the better off funding? Can I just clarify that? Because I thought what that meant was, if we had a project in year 3 that we wanted to bring forward and there was a cost associated with doing that, as in loan costs, interest, all those kind of things, we could do that. I wasn't entirely sure we could do it if we knew there was a project that was going to cost, we thought 10 million, and now it's going to cost 15, that we could bring forward 5.
So and a good example, say, would be the Huntly Wastewater Treatment Plant. So the Huntly Wastewater Treatment Plant is in the LTP to 28-29. We might determine that we want to escalate that and bring that forward and add additional capacity outside of that of the LTP. So the funding that's in the LTP can't be covered by the better off funding, but certainly the escalation process can be, and any additional costs that are outside of the current project can be. So there is the ability to assist and aid those projects and bring them forward, but just not the original capital or the nominated capital for the project itself.
All right. So Jackie, does that pick your point up? My sense equally was that you were looking to see that we as a group should be proactive in advancing projects that we saw made sense. Obviously, it becomes a council process as to what gets chosen or not, but I would have thought amongst ourselves here that and the Huntly would be the one that would have occurred to me, but equally there may well be other projects where we have abatements or other requirements upon us where bringing forward that expenditure could well resolve some of the issues we have in terms of their meeting consent conditions. So where to from here, Keith? Do we leave you to come back to us with those 3 water projects that may well form part of the long list, so that at least we get a chance to look at them? Because again, picking up Councillor Patterson's point, the earlier we're engaged from the water governance perspective, equally the better.
Yes, certainly. And I'm happy to also take from email if anybody's got any thoughts for us to add early as well.
Yep. Well, I think Huntley probably sits there as an obvious one.
Mr. Chair, I think the other challenge with this is the challenge we've got on everything else, which is the capacity of the market to actually, if we think about another $500 million worth of money around the country, the ability to actually be able to spend that money and use that money for projects which already we've got, I think everyone's struggling to make progress.
Yeah, point made. That'll be across the whole spread of what projects, not just 3 waters. All right, I think we need to leave that one with you, but please engage with us either out of cycle or at the next governance board around what you might think from the 3 water space will be sitting in the long list. All right, any final comments there? Otherwise, we'll just note, do we need to move receipt of that? Or we just...
Yes, we do.
To manage to rationalise the actions register or not?
Got another voice happening there, but anyway, look, I'm happy to move receipt of the receive the report and note the project management for water reform is ongoing. Moved by Gavin, seconded by Gavin. All in favour? Carried. All right, that takes us to 6.3, the 3 waters governance report. Who is talking to that? Is that you this time, Carol?
Matthew will talk to that.
That is Matthew. All right.
Thank you, Chair. So again, taking the report as read, just running through some of the key points over the last 6 weeks. So this is covering primarily the February-March period. So I'm happy to report that we achieved performance outcomes across both months, but we've just represented March in this, and it also shows that the year-to-date is on track for all performance measures, which is a positive. Just a few key call-outs. So we had a really good internal story communication around the restrictions done over the activities that we did around water restrictions across summer. That was for internal staff across Watercare and WDC, just highlighting some of the activities of the team around changing the approach to water restrictions and making sure that they were more tailored to the Waikato district rather than just a general alignment with what was happening across the wider region, which was what historically happened. The outcome of that is there was no required restrictions this year, which is, I think, a great positive. And a big part of that was to ensure that when restrictions are in place, that they're understood and they achieve the outcome required of changes behaviour, other than just kind of initiating them every year, at which point people start to probably take less attention of them than you'd want. Just detailed some of the impact of the Cyclone Dovey, which was quite significant across the region. I'm sure Garth can share some of what we went through, but power outages was quite a significant issue across the region, impacting a large number of pump stations and plants. So one of the activities for us out of that was looking at more permanent generators at critical sites, just to ensure that the impact of those kind of events can be mitigated. To a certain extent, we were probably quite lucky that there wasn't heavy rain during the cyclone as well, because that would have created probably quite a lot more issues. I think that's about the only positive we could take out of it. The staff worked exceptionally hard across those 2 days, as I'm sure, again, Garth can probably attest to what happened with themselves. It was quite an unprecedented event. Just an update on the filling stations. So we've confirmed the locations for the new permanent filling stations. So they're now progressing along with the expectation to get them installed before July. That will be quite a tight timeframe, but it's what we're still aiming to achieve. The update just on the COVID and the management of that across the team. So as you're aware, we broke the operational teams into either plant specific for the production team or 3 regional approaches for the networks team. To date, 60% of the team has been impacted by COVID, but it's actually happened due to those measures in such a way that we've really had more than one person off at any one time. So I don't think you could really get much more success out of an approach than that. Obviously, I don't think anybody expected that we wouldn't have cases. It was just ensuring that we didn't have a large number of them at the same time. So that's been quite successful. We're now going to be reviewing that just to see if there's any change required in that at the moment, because it has created additional work and strain for the team being separated. But at this stage, the focus was to ensure that we were not overly impacted by COVID and had a loss of the field services available. Just an update on our health and safety. So for the 2 months were positive months in health and safety. I believe you have all been notified though that we did have a health and safety event on the 12th of April, which involves an incident at the Tikawhara wastewater treatment plant. That's related to the installation of the MABR plant. Unfortunately, one of the subcontractors was working at the time and has crushed their finger in between 2 metal objects. That's been investigated. The initial outcome of that investigation does appear that it was a 2-person job being done by 1 person. And we've had the on-site investigation. We did also notify obviously the council and WorkSafe. WorkSafe have chosen not to progress the investigation any further. They were grateful for the notification, and the site was returned the following day after an on-site meeting and discussion with everyone, including the injured person who attended that investigation, but obviously was off work for the subsequent 3 days. So obviously very disappointing. We've had we've been very successful in this area and intend to continue in that way. So it's important to learn from these incidents. So we will be providing a report to the council, to Watercare itself as well, just so we can all learn from these events and make sure this type of situation doesn't occur again. Just one of the other nice updates, we provided welding training to all the teams, so PP welding training, and not the great thing, but because of a burst quite closely following that training, 3 of the team were able to implement that training almost immediately. So that was quite successful, and good that the training had been given in time so that they could apply it in the field. Just a quick update on the Raglan Filters, which is the filters in the Raglan water treatment plant to avoid any water quality issues due to earthquakes or events that can happen that can affect the water sources. So that has been constructed and is in place and will be commissioned this month. So that just gives an extra level of security at the Raglan water treatment plant. We will be planning some visits to the Rna treatment plant. We took staff up there and did some tours, and we're planning to take a few others. So if anybody from the governance board or wider group or the councillors would be interested in attending, we'd be more than happy to take you on that tour so I can notify you when that's going to happen. It's a great plant to have a look at, really interesting to see such a new plant and such a new process in place. And just a last update on something we don't talk about too often, which is the complex meters, which was the separation of 176 properties that were connected for services. So we have now completed 75% of those, 132 meters, 21% are still in train, and we have all the approvals, so it's just working. 8% we're waiting for approvals, of which 3 we haven't been able to contact, 3% we haven't been able to contact the owner. So overall, just on 90% of those complex meters should be completed within the next month to 2 months. So quite a success story there, glad to get that job completed. The last 3 we've got sitting with the council legal team to help us try and track them down so we can get their approval. But other than that, as I said, the rest of the report being taken as read, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. Yes, good. Great to note that Mary is operational, and that certainly is a major project when you think of the life of this board thus far. So well done to all concerned getting it to the point of being operational and hopefully now in compliance. So with that, open it up for any questions or comments. Gavin, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So It's more of a comment than a question. So the Raglan water treatment plant, and just a reminder that when we had the earthquake in Kaikoura, we had issues around the water quality at that stage, and we ended up having to truck and tanker water into Raglan for some days until the water cleared. So Matt, I'm presuming from what you're saying, that's one of the issues that you've been trying to address through the work that's been done?
Absolutely, Gavin. Yes, I mean it's essentially an earthquake detector, if nothing else. So our water quality out of that aquifer or out of the stream is a real detector of earthquakes around quite a significant region. White Island was another event. So yeah, that's absolutely that, and it's also a DIA funded project as well. So so that's good that it'll be completed in time for July.
Okay, two other things I just want to comment on, Mr. Chair, if I may. The complex meters, that has been a project that's been ongoing for some years. It's really important to get that done because at the moment we have this administrative challenge around a few properties within our district that aren't separately metered, that we have to charge a targeted rate on instead. And the aim is to get all these properties separated so we can, and on separate meters, so then we can completely charge through water by meter charges, as well as there is still a fixed targeted rate component which covers things such as depreciation and those kind of fixed charges. Mr. Chair, the other one I just wanted to comment on, which was a bugbear for me, was the removal of the Hopuhopu water treatment plants. We went and looked at that on a site visit, and I'm really pleased to see that that's been addressed because I was concerned about that as a health and safety risk. So it's good to see that work being completed. So Matt, thanks for that.
Absolutely, no, we absolutely shared that concern after that visit we took there. It was unfortunately just impossible to keep people out of that plant. So the removal was the best outcome.
No, thanks, Gavin. Ruku.
Thanks, Matt. Good report, and just want to acknowledge everyone's efforts in responding to the impact of the storm. That was, it's good to see.
Thank you.
Two questions from me. First one, the report highlights two significant SCADA comms losses. What does that mean in terms of the loss, and what's a comms loss? So, and what happens therefore to that data, that real-time data that we are not collecting, and what impact does that have on the system, if any? Sorry, and quickly, the other quick question was around the comment about congestion at the Te Kauwhata site, and what are we doing about it going forward?
Okay, perfect. So for the initial SCADA, SCADA can be impacted by a number of things. So power outages, lack of connectivity, and server events. And one of the activities we're doing at the moment is to address primarily the server events that we've been having. But for the events that occurred, they were primarily due to power outages, so no power to the plants. Now the plants themselves, they do continue to record the data as necessary when they're on, when they have generators and when they have backup power. And what they don't do is they don't necessarily communicate that to the centralized hub, which is what the team use to access the data and make decisions based on how the network is operating and what they have to do. So that's the primary risk associated with SCADA not operating, which is just a lack of visibility where issues are occurring, which means, and the event was a great example of it, which means we have to have people driving around all sites just to keep an eye on them manually, rather than what the system would normally do for us. So it's not really a long-term sustainable option to have staff do that. It's really important to get SCADA back up and operating as quickly as possible. And so that's where power and telephone. So the second event is, as you would have seen in the report, was caused by an excavation. So somebody with a digger essentially just ripping everything out of the ground, and we lost complete connectivity. So we had to, and the Port Waikato plant is quite a small plant. So we just had to have somebody attend on a daily basis to ensure the reservoirs was topped up, to ensure we didn't run out of water and it was operating correctly. correctly. So it really becomes more of a resource drain to operate in that way.
Okay. There's not really any other way around it, and they're not regular occurrences as such. So
they probably happen more frequently in the Waikato than in my experience in Auckland, to be perfectly honest, which is why we're making some changes. So we're updating the equipment to the Kingfisher equipment, which is across the entire region, and the current SCADA work to replace the servers and the actual local desktops and software. So upgrading all that to the current versions. But no, unfortunately, if somebody rips power and telecom out of the ground, there's very little we can do. The systems do have a backup where the text alerts will come out at certain trigger points. So as much as possible, we've got backups. In regards to the congestion, we're working on site with the contractors and the project managers are just working with them to ensure that the congestion is managed correctly. Obviously, the event on the 12th was disappointing, but it doesn't appear to have been associated to congestion. It was really more somebody just not waiting for somebody there to come and assist. So really, it's in some cases, it's just about making sure everybody's aware that it's important to deliver, but we've got to take it slow and make sure it's safe and make sure everything is done correctly. And that's where congestion can be a risk, where people feel they have to get in there and do the work quickly and then get out. So we're certainly conveying that message to the contractor that the safety is the first priority and the delivery is a second priority.
Good, thanks. Ruku, does that answer your queries?
yes, yeah, thank you.
Gus, I see your hand up.
Oh, fine, thanks.
Okay, Jackie.
I'm fine, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Equally, so am I, Matt. So I think we're in a position to receive the report, but just many thanks again, and it's great to see the progress we are making over across a wide range of areas. So with that, could I have someone move that the Waters Governance Board report be received? I think I saw Ruku, seconded by Garth, all in favour, carried. Okay, we come to 6.4, the compliance summary. Who is talking to that?
That will be me again, Mr. Chair. Matt, I'm not sure if Grant King is trying to join, has been allowed in to the meeting. Is there somebody
He should be
waiting?
coming in now.
Oh, there he is now. There, perfect. That's great. So again, taking the report as read. So as we've discussed at a few of the governance board meetings, we're really keen to make sure there's clear visibility of the compliance issues and some of the challenges we hold at the moment across the network. So I've asked Grant King, who's our compliance coordinator working within the team in the place of Bliss, whom you may have met in the past, who's on a break at the moment till November. So Grant has joined us to support that and to continue to progress the work Bliss was doing. As you can see from the report, again, taking it as read, a number of our compliance challenges, as you all know, are in the wastewater area and the plant, the operations of the plants that we have there around Huntly, Narrawahia and Raglan, and obviously TK and Merrimeri are the two that are having work done on them at the moment. So the ongoing maintenance of those plants and the ability to maintain compliance can be a challenge. So one of the DIA projects we've recently done was the desludging of the lakes or the ponds, sorry, at Huntly and at Narrawahia. And whilst that will ultimately help the plants become more compliant in the short term, they disturb the ponds quite significantly to create some negative results. So we're working with Waikato Regional Council constantly, really, and we have a very good relationship with them, I believe, to ensure that they're aware of the activities we're taking and the possible implications of those and what we're doing to mitigate them. Obviously, the larger activities are to address the plants themselves. They aren't really sustainable in the condition that they are in the types of plants that we operate across the Waikato, which is why Merrimeri, again, is a great example of what we want to be seeing more of across the region. I know that there are other options being considered, and Jackie will be aware that I know you're going to talk about later today around centralisation versus decentralised plants. And I don't think there's a perfect answer to that. It's really specific to each environment and each situation. But the Tikawhara plant, it will be the next plant that we'll be addressing, and the compliance of that should be addressed by December, when the new ABR plant will be in place. The UV, which was the earlier stages, just been completed, and we're now moving on to the MABR, and then the later stages will obviously be associated to the discharge, whether that be land or river, or to address the waste discharge from the plants. So as you can see, the only other point I thought I'd mention around the reports, it was around the OMN manuals, or the OMN reports for each of the plants. So this is an area that we've identified hasn't really been maintained as well as they should. So we're committing to have those updated by July 2022 and have them to the WRC. So it is to a certain degree an administrative issue of making sure that they're reviewed and updated, which has probably gone secondary to the operations of the plant, but we need to ensure that the plants are operating as we expect them to be, and that we have the right processes and procedures in place, which is what those reviews are there to do. So we're committed to make sure that happens by July, and then obviously put in place more of a regime to ensure that they're done annually at the least. Some of the O&M plans haven't actually been reviewed in quite a number of years. So that's one other area which is low, although is considered a low risk compliance. Non-compliance is something that we don't want to have there as a record or even a concern. So beyond that, happy to take any questions about the report, and if I can't answer, that's why Grant's here to fill in the gaps.
No, thanks, Matt, and it's good to see that where we have had significant non-compliances, we've got the various work in train progressing, and having visibility over that is certainly good to see. So questions or comments for either Matt or others? I see no hands up, so.
Good report, Mr. Chair.
Yep, we do. Jackie?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Matt. Really appreciated this report. I think it provides a really nice line of sight to what's actually happening across the board. I just had one question around, I guess, the status that's been assigned to different plants. And in particular, if I pull out an example, what the difference is between, say, a Ngaruawahia treatment plant, moderate non-compliance, and a Raglan non-compliance or significant non-compliance. What are the types of things that differentiate between the way they've been?
Oh, you've got on silent, Jackie, sorry. Oh, there you go.
Oh, did you?
I think I caught most of that. So your question was in relation to the difference of the statuses for certain plants, why some would be considered higher risk than others.
Yeah, I saw the definition of the different status levels, but I just wondered if you could explain, what the difference is, say, between Ngaruawahia, which we've got, notice of direction for, or abatement notice for as well, and a Raglan.
So I don't believe we have an abatement notice for Ngaruawahia at this stage. You're quite right, it is a letter of direction, versus something like Raglan, which is an abatement notice, and Tikawhara, which is an abatement notice due to significant non-compliance. It is unfortunately a progression of non-compliance. So working with the regional council around the actions and what's going to be put in place to address them. So Ngaruawahia, as an example, is more of a new non-compliance due to the ponds and the nature of them. But I mean, Grant, is there anything you could add around the actual the status levels or the risk levels that are identified?
I can't really comment on the specific details of what, but I can say that these are regional council's compliance status criteria, and they assign them to they look at each condition and they give a compliance status for each condition, and then they give an overall site compliance status, and that's the one that's in this report. And so it takes into context the number of non-compliances, and I suppose the regional council's interpretation of the significance of that. And that's why, and like saying that, maybe the previous reports as well.
Yeah, I think that's again, the point is that we don't specify that level. It is specified by regional council.
Yeah, that's nice and clear. Thanks, Matt.
Great.
Thank you, Grant.
Good. No, thank you. Any further questions? If not, then can I have someone move that we receive that report? Ruku moved, seconded. I'll second. All in favour? And equally, Matt, just again, I think it would be useful to have this brought back to us on some sort of regular basis, not every meeting, but it does, as Jackie said, it does give us a very good oversight of the plants and the progress that we're making.
Absolutely happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
Right, that takes us to 6.5, trade waste and wastewater bylaw. Right, who is, and now it's Carol.
Sure, I'll talk to this one. So this is really just to give you early heads up and notification that our trade waste and wastewater bylaw is due for renewal or review. It's after 5 years, we have a 2-year period to review it. So we've got around 16 months remaining to carry out that review. It goes through a similar process like we did with the water supply bylaw last year that you might recall. So we've got a workshop next week with council, alluding to what Councillor Patterson mentioned earlier about not taking things to council that are fait of complete, but the early stage so we can get the input from councillors on what they feel we need to perhaps review, remove, include. Council staff and water care have got a few areas that we have already identified that we'd like to look at, and so we've just bullet pointed listed them those there, but we've still got quite a bit of work to do to understand those and see what else council might want us to look at. Following that, we will then move to an early engagement with key stakeholders ahead of the formal engagement period that's open to the general public. So I've included a copy of the actual current bylaw in there for you, and it's really just to seek any feedback either as part of this meeting or even after this meeting of any areas of concern or that you'd specifically like staff to look at as part of our review.
Thanks, Carol. With that, I think I'll simply open it up for any immediate comment or questions that directors might have. No. Jackie.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to say that I agree with a lot of the areas that the staff have already noted, that are probably gaps in the current bylaw. Really happy to see that the team are working closely with the Hamilton City team, who are also reviewing their wastewater and trade waste bylaw right now. The mortuary waste issue has been an issue that's been raised by Hapu and Mana Whenua in Kirikiriroa, so will no doubt be raised in Waikato District as well. The other area that is being raised in other places is in relation to responses to the MPS urban development and the MDRS, and how mechanisms like trade waste bylaws and connections policies and the likes can potentially be used to help us manage the impact of that densification on our networks where we don't have budget or anything planned to upgrade the local and trunk systems. So yeah, just really happy to receive the report and look forward to where the team get to in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Ruku.
Sorry, no, Jackie has covered the point I wanted to raise around the mortuary, but again, I actually did read it, well, most of it anyway, the policy, and just appreciate the work that's been done. Thank you.
So, Garth.
Oh, I just wondered if there's anything on allocation, like obviously there's a finite amount of trade waste and wastewater that we can handle. I mean, how does the allocation process work for new entrants or even existing?
I think it's largely first come, first served. So someone who approaches us looking at our capacity in whatever region they're in on that plant as well, and also noting that if it's in the North Waikato, it also has the impact of the water care plant, wastewater plant at Tuakau, about what they can actually receive.
So if someone comes in who kind of is the straw that breaks the camel's back, who pays?
That's where we'd look at a development agreement if we're having to upgrade the infrastructure to take that, and that's very much what we're looking at as part of what's happening in the North Waikato at the moment with the wastewater pipeline.
Yeah, okay. So allocations on a first and first served basis, and if I come in with a 10 litres more than what's current capacity, then I pay for, or that developer pays for the upgrade, or a percentage of that upgrade.
Potentially a percentage, and looking at the timing of what we do, what's appropriate, what's the public benefit versus benefiting just that one entity.
Okay, so in terms of the bylaw, though, that this doesn't sort of cover that kind of process, does it?
No, it does. Doesn't. They're generally handled through a separate development agreement, and also looking at what's in our long-term plan about when we tend to upgrade, because we often won't upgrade just for that one business. We'd then future-proof at the same time. So looking at funding for that and so forth and timing.
So this is just compliance with existing allocation.
Yes.
Okay. No, thank you. It was a little bit kind of.
Just to add another point, if that's okay, Chair, in response. So with the trade waste element, it is also management of the waste itself. So that can include pre-treatment and working with that party to ensure that the waste that they provide is suitable to not only manage the volume aspects, but also the nature of the waste, so it doesn't impact the plant operation. So that's also a very key part of the bylaw, and working with the clients around the nature of the waste and any pre-treatment requirements.
So waste quality is something which is also key. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thanks. So yeah, I just was trying to get my head around kind of how the thing fitted really, because it's yeah. Okay. No, thanks. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. I presume through this process, Carol, that if there are any issues that emerge of material significance to Three Waters, either through your officers working up of the policy or its consultation phase, you would come back to the governance board for our views and inputs.
Yes, and we've built the Waters Governance Board into our time frame.
Well, thank you.
Throughout the project process.
All right. So I think we just need to receive that report, do we not, Matt? It's for information only. Oh,
But there's a second.
Garth, you've got your hand up. Is that
Sorry,
another?
yeah. No.
Sorry, back to democracy, Matt.
Oh, there's a second line saying and advise specific areas and topics to be considered. But we will need to move in a second for that recommendation.
Right. Well, I think at the moment, one or two areas have been raised, which are obviously captured within the work that's been done. So on the basis of the recommendation there, I'm happy to move it. Do I have someone second? It's Gavin, all in favour? Carried. Stormwater improvements.
I'll just introduce Zainab, who's going to talk to this paper. So Zainab is a council employee in the Waters team here. She's been working quite closely with Watercare over quite a time period at looking at making improvements to our stormwater, and we thought this would be a nice way just to highlight some of the work that's gone on in this space. I'll hand you over to Zainab. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Carol. Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me present this work on the stormwater improvement areas. I'll obviously just give you a brief overview and take the report as read. So we've been holding monthly stormwater collaboration workshops for some time now, and these sessions involve internal and external staff, including the Watercare stormwater engineer, roading assets team, district alliance, open spaces, and sometimes even Waikato Regional Council. So these workshops have helped us to identify problem areas in the stormwater space. And one critical area was the design standards. So this led to this piece of work done by Watercare in consultation with and collaboration with the rest of the group, which is the Stormwater Guidelines document. And the purpose of this document is to provide best practice design guidance for developers and the land development engineers. So the document helps to provide standardized assets, increase maintenance efficiencies, and reduce the risk to environment from poorly designed assets. So currently we're just in the process of receiving final feedback from several parties, including the policy and planning team, the LDEs, and some developers, to make sure we have full support to ensure the document is going to be utilized and referred to as much as possible. Also, we've also already received feedback from Waikato Regional Council, which has been mainly positive. In the report, you'll see that I've given you a summary of the main themes in the guidelines, but once it's finalized shortly, it will be available on the public website as well. So the other major piece of work that has come out of our stormwater collaboration workshop is the delineation and demarcation of stormwater assets. And this is where we've outlined the stormwater asset ownership in table and graphic form. This work has helped us to clearly define maintenance responsibilities for internal groups, including the Stormwater Operations Team, which is Water Care, Roading Alliance, Open Spaces, as well as external parties, including Waikato Regional Council, NZTA, and Waikato, I've already mentioned Regional Council. You'll find these graphics in the report and also in our public website, and they basically help to visualize district-wide responsibilities and urban delineation. It's just important to point out that the graphics are not intended to show a perfect design scenario, but just more to visualize ownership and maintenance responsibilities. So yeah, that's just an overview of some of the work done in the stormwater space. I'm happy to take any questions, and if there's any specific technical questions with the guidelines, I can go back to the previous stormwater engineer.
Thank you very much for that. It would certainly be good to get clarity around this before any potential vesting of assets in the entity B. So I'm sure it'll be a piece of work that will serve well going forward. Questions or comments from anyone?
No questions as such from me, Mr. Chair. I just thought it's a great piece of work. I think the issues that you've identified in the stormwater space and are spot on, and doing that deeper dive in terms of how we get the relevant information and what it means for us is really important, particularly in this transition phase. So yeah, just acknowledge the good work, Mr. Chair.
And equally endorse that.
Yeah.
Becky.
Just reinforce Ruku's comments. I really enjoyed this paper, Zanab, and thank you for your work. Just had one question, and maybe we can take this offline. What sort of overall philosophy is being proposed through the stormwater guidelines, particularly in relation to, I guess, centralised stormwater treatment versus on-lot and on-lot treatment, and I guess what's being recommended around proprietary solutions like rain gardens and those types of things, just really cognizant of the long-term operating costs associated with those sort of systems. So yeah, really interested in, I guess, where the guideline has landed in terms of providing clarity on those types of solutions and the philosophy. The other question I have is, if a developer's coming in and wanting to do a development, which document do they pick up first, and what's the I guess the status of this particular guideline compared to the regional technical specifications and the regional council guidelines? Just a lot of guideline documents out there.
Yes, so the answer to your first question, so we have given preferred treatment devices, and maybe I can send you a copy of, because it hasn't been finalized yet, a copy of the stormwater guidelines, just so you can see what obviously had been included as a preferred treatment device. In terms of there are so many different guidelines, and this specific one isn't including any new information, but just giving the best practice. Sort of, I don't know if that sort of answers your question, but it does reference the regional technical specification and also the Waikato regional guidelines in this document here, but it is best practice for our district specifically.
Yeah, I'd be really interested in seeing a copies in our,
yeah,
just really cognizant of the ongoing sort of whole of life costs associated with some of these solutions, and wanting to, I guess, understand what what considerations been put into that in identifying the preferred solutions for the district? Kia ora.
All right, we'll leave that to be supplied. Perhaps you could circulate it to us all.
Sure.
Right. If there's no more further questions, then just thank you very much for the work that's being done, and we'll come back to the recommendation there, which is to receive and note. So I won't read it fully out, but can I get somebody to move, please? Moved by Ruku, seconded by Gavin, all in favour? Aye, passed. That, I think, takes us to the exclusion of end of the open agenda item, exclusion of the public. We have normally there our resolution to move into public excluded, noting the inclusion of the water care representatives. So I'm happy to move. Can I get somebody to second?